Hello everyone, welcome back to another Stitches and Scribbles tutorial. This is part 2 of the Ombre Kimono cardigan that I started last week. So as you can see, I have finished my entire crocheted piece, and now what we're going to be working on is finishing up the seamed ends. So as you can see, as I did in the previous video, I started off with my dark teals, moved towards whites in the center, and you can also see that opening in the middle where your neck would go and how you would put on the cardigan. And then off camera I finished off the blue stripes on the other side. So what I've done now, I measured how wide I wanted my armhole to be, and in this case I decided I wanted the armhole to be 8 inches, so a little bit longer than a normal armhole would be, but since this is designed to be kind of a drapey, oversized sweater, I left it a little bit bigger. And I put stitch markers along the rest of the length of the cardigan just so that it doesn't fall apart as I'm trying to sew it together, and it kind of keeps things together a little bit easier. So I have my thread on this end. I'm going to go ahead and thread my yarn needle. I'm using a big metal one. I know that these come in plastic, but I actually do prefer the metal ones pretty strongly because they don't seem to get caught on things as much, and I don't like it when the needle bends as I'm working, so I do prefer the plastic ones. I'm going to go ahead and sew this up using a mattress stitch. So instead of a whip stitch, which would be going almost around in circles like a spiral staircase through the seam, I'm going to be going back and forth. And what this does, at least in my opinion, is give a little bit of a stronger structure than a whip stitch would, and keeps it together a little bit better. A lot of times when I do use whip stitch, I can see the seam really clearly at the end and see like gaps in it. So I do like the mattress stitch better just because it keeps things a little bit tidier. And I'm going to do that all the way down the length of the measurement that I marked off before. Alright, so now I have sewn up both sides of my sweater to make those armholes. You can see where I seamed it up there. And again, that mattress stitch is going to keep everything nice and tight and kind of blended together. And again, I have those 8-inch armholes. So here's the part where you can get really creative with this pattern. So I am somebody who has a particularly long torso, which means that a lot of times when I buy clothes, I tend to get them bigger or longer on purpose just so that they fit more the way I want them to fit. So even though this piece is fine on its own, when I put it on, it does look a little bit cropped, even though I did measure it against a different piece before I started, which is kind of odd. So I'm actually going to add a crocheted trim to the bottom, and I'm going to use the exact same stitch pattern that I used for the body of the sweater. This is also really helpful if you are like me and absolutely hate weaving in ends. Instead of weaving in all of these little ends with the stripes we did, you can kind of just crochet over them as you go. So I'm going to go ahead and start that using the leftover white yarn that I used for the very center stripe of this piece. I'm going to go ahead and start with a slip knot, grab my crochet hook again, and start just right in that corner, so the top of the chain 3 stitch that was on the very bottom of that row. And start with a chain 3. So I'm going to hold the tail of my yarn right along my work so that I can weave it in as I start my first row around. And for my first row around, I am just going to do plain double crochet, and the next row that I do, I will start that lace stitch that we did with the double crochet chain 1 skip 1 pattern. So you can see that as I'm going, I'm hiding that tail in the stitches because I'm crocheting around it. So you can go ahead and continue that all the way around the bottom, and then I'll show you the next row. Alright, so I have gone all the way around once, and as I went around, I wove in all of my ends from the edges of the stripes. So I'm going to continue by doing my lace pattern that I used for the body of the cardigan. So, starting at the edge of the row, I'm going to chain 3 to count as my first double crochet. I'm going to double crochet 1 in the second stitch to kind of give us a nice border on the edge so that it's not as unstructured. Then I'm going to chain 1, skip 1 stitch, and double crochet into the next one so that we get that square panel hole again. So again, I'm going to chain 1 and double crochet in the stitch 2 over. Chain 1 and double crochet, making sure to leave that space in between for all your rows. So I'm actually going to add quite a few rows to my sweater because I do want it to sit longer. So I'm using up the white that I didn't use before, but I'm also going to use some leftovers from my other pack of the Hobie rainbow yarn. I have some of that kind of mint turquoise color and a light blue. I did have some leftovers from the set that I used. I actually just kind of caked them all up because I wanted to see what they would look like all together. So I did have a pretty significant amount of leftovers when I made this. Plus there was the second kind of off-white one that I didn't even use. So if you are using the Hobie rainbow yarn packs for this, you will end up with an extra one if you followed exactly what I did, as well as a little bit of leftovers from each color. So when you are adding on the trim to your cardigan, you can use your one extra one, you can use all of the leftovers from each skein, you can do more of the lace 2-row repeat like I'm doing, you could add fringe, you could add a scalloped edge. It's really up to you, and you can completely customize this to how you want. I also think that this cardigan would look super cute if you did it all in black and added some really vibrant colors just as the trim. So there's really a lot of options for this. I'm going to come back once I have finished my trim so that you can see what the final product looks like. Alright, and here's just one final shot to show you the finished project. I am showing it over a dress because that's probably how I would wear it. But this would also be great as a pool cover-up over a swimsuit, or with jeans and a solid color t-shirt. I think would also be really cute. So yeah, that's kind of it for the tutorial. Again, totally customizable. You can add more rows at the bottom than I did. I'll come in a little closer so you can see how many I added. I just did a couple in the white, a couple in the light blue, and a couple in one of the teal shades. I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial, and let me know if you end up making it yourself. See you next time.